That was yummy. I could be one late when one was never expected. Listen here, you little shit. I'm always expecting you, no matter who you are. Alright. You've been promoted to little shit. Hey, shut up. Alright. You require chocolate and scales? I already ate the chocolate and you're never getting the scales, so I don't know what to tell you. It's never gonna happen. Can you hear me, chat? Good afternoon, Boka. How are you? I'm doing alright. It will happen eventually. Maybe. My voice is a bit low. What do you mean? Music might be a little loud. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know how loud it is for you guys. Alright, there we go. I'm to the floor. I'm too far. Alright. So what are we doing, guys? What's the plan? What's the plan, you lot? What's the plan, you lot? Obviously, part of the plan is we're gonna do some reacts. Because that's what we do. At least right now. What the heck is this? I don't know what this is. Hi, Niner. But we'll watch it. It looks interesting. Balthasar Gelt? Like PancreasNoWork?
The blink of an eye. Or how about being magical? Look me in the eyes and tell me that if someone said you could become a powerful mage, you would say no. No one would say no to that because everyone wants to be a wizard. Even you, the person who's gonna larp in the comments and call magic dishonorable.
Actually, I would have to say, is there a dragon option?
Magic is great. Wave your hands and cast a cool spell. It'd be fantastic.
Actually, because you became a wizard, there is a chance you could become a fake dragon.
Just imagine prestidigitation in your everyday life. You would never need to clean your house again.
Wizards.
But what if those things fed into each other?
Wizards with gizzards.
What if your powerful magic could make you a richer person? And what if all your money allowed you to get things to become an even more powerful wizard? Wouldn't that be something special? Well, in the world of Warhammer Fantasy, we've got a character who's just that. Balthasar Gelt. He's rich, he's powerful, he's a wizard extraordinaire. In fact, in the Empire of Man, I'd go so far as to say he's the wizard. Though there may be some more powerful than he, there's no one who can control the lore of metal quite like he does. So get comfortable, and listen about the man who used his mighty gifts of the arcane to scam taxi drivers out of $50. Origin.
Scam taxi drivers?
That lends credence as to how he was able to gain the position he eventually would. He was the son of someone who was not only a phenomenal apothecary, but the doctor of a noble house in the Border Princess. So while not exactly coming from a long line of kings or heroes, he came from a reasonably wealthy family that could afford him chances to look into more untraditional careers, as it were. Indeed, he appeared to be quite talented at creating medicine, doing far better than even those with decades of experience on him. He also had an almost instinctual grasp on the
TTS is not I am sorry. You guys know, you gotta remind me of these things. There you go.
Of various minerals and herbs, like a somewhat less full of himself Dr. House. His true passion, however, was...
House isn't full of themselves. They just know what they know. They know that. And they know that most people don't know what they know. They're just very blunt about everything. That doesn't mean they're full of themselves. They also know that a lot of people around them aren't as smart as them. So it comes across as being full of themselves. But in reality, they're just very confident in themselves.
Was alchemy, presumably using the wealth both his family and his own work.
Because if you notice, when he is actually wrong, he's surprised. Because he's like, but I had all the things in order. It shows that he's human.
But given him, he was able to travel the world and study under the most intelligent people the lands
Give
had to
me
offer.
your scales,
Tylea,
or I will
Araby,
science the shite out of you.
Beyond. Everywhere he went, he would not
Like
only
you
learn
could.
everything his teachers had to teach, but almost always he'd end up being able to teach them a thing or two. But
So he's Sheldon.
The time he finally came to the colleges of magic in Altdorf, he was admitted into it with absolutely no questions asked. He was just that damn good. Except everything before that bit was very possibly just a lie. Gelt's fooled all of you. Because while it's true he was admitted without a formal apprenticeship due to his impressive skill, no one actually knows where he comes from or what his backstory is. He certainly isn't being upfront about—
Wait. Did we just learn where he was born? Don't we know where he came from? I don't understand.
About it, and any investigations that have been conducted to explain who the hell the Magic Metal Man is have come up short. They do occasionally find people who have dealt with him before, but whenever they bring him up, the conversation abruptly stops. Maybe he's threatening them, or maybe that previous story has some truth and they're embarrassed he showed him up. For all we know, he put a curse on everyone who's talked to him, so that they explain who he is, they turn into gold on the spot. We do at least know how he arrived in Altdorf. He came on a merchant ship from Marienburg after paying for it with solid gold bars, which days after arriving in Altdorf turned into solid lead bars. The ship captain put a bounty on Gelt's head for fooling him like that, and to my knowledge it's still there to this day. Jumping ahead a bit, this means the holder of one of the highest positions in the entire Empire of Man has a bounty on his head. And no one has tried to claim it yet.
No
or
one
at least
will.
If anyone has, we don't hear from them.
If he's that high rank, no one will, because there's a reason he's that high rank.
Anymore. It should—
So I'm guessing this is Warhammer, right? Is this Warhammer Fantasy? And if it is, like, anyone that's high rank is terrifying.
It should be noted that at least from everything I know about the guy, he didn't need to do that. Whether or not he does come from a somewhat wealthy family, he's an incredibly powerful metal wizard and can turn things into gold permanently. Even ignoring that, he absolutely could have made some money with his own talents and skills. As far as I can tell, he just scammed that captain for the love of the game.
Nice night,
Upon becoming a licensed Imperial wizard, though, he didn't just sit around and enjoy all the perks that gives. However much of his backstory is true or not, his passion for alchemy and the lore of metal undoubtedly is. He would set to work in the College of Metal's workshops and labs with a fervor unmatched by anyone else, and his enthusiasm for both learning and teaching apparently made him a popular figure in the lecture halls. And honestly, who wouldn't want to be taught by Gelt? Within a decade, he had become the patriarch of the Metal College, taking the position from the previous one, Magdalena Althaus. Minor fun lore fact, they're called the Supreme Matriarch if they're a woman. He even gained quite a few friends amongst Imperial engineers. Alchemy in fantasy settings tends to be equal parts science and magic, and Gelt respected both fields. He was in particular interested—
He respects both fields, so that means he actually is very smart. He doesn't have, like, any kind of pre-assumptions.
in finding out new and better formulas for gunpowder, and his respect for material science made sure that the Imperial Gunnery School was happy whenever Gelt came around, even though they usually aren't too fond of wizard crap.
I bet you that they're happy he's around because he respects both halves. He doesn't think, oh, his magic is just better.
Maybe he should have been a bit more careful with some of those experiments, though, because one day something went rather explosively wrong. The specifics of what exactly happened, like many things about Gelt, are a mystery. Truth be told, it could have been any number of things. Messing around with gunpowder is asking for trouble at the best of times. The same could be said for magic in this setting, and Gelt, being a lore of metal wizard, had bravely devoted his life to digging around with the dangerous parts of both reality and unreality. For all we know, that ship captain that put a bounty on his head got his revenge and snuck a bomb in or something. We don't even know how he came out of this whole affair. Is he horribly disfigured, or is the skin beneath his golden mask now the purest living gold? We don't know and never will, because Gelt refuses to take it off. That second option would be incredibly funny, though, given the Tomb King's existence and Cetra's demand prior to his death. Turns out living gold bodies are easy as hell to obtain. Just blow yourself up. That may be the reason he hides behind the mask, actually. If he really did have golden skin and Cetra found out, the Empire of Man would be crawling in Tomb Kings until they kidnapped him and forced him to recreate what happened. This accident wasn't the wake-up call to either calm down or find a new profession, as it probably should have been. Gelt, if anything, renewed his studies with more interest than ever before. One fateful day, he even managed to become the Supreme Patriarch, a fact which he lets you know every other time you select him in Total War. Every 8 years, you see, the college—
He's like, I am the Supreme Patriarch. I am Patriarch.
of magic would come together to decide the next one. A contest is held which involves the current Supreme Patriarch and the representatives of the other 7 orders entering what's known as the Obsidian Hall. Obsidian apparently dampens magic, which is especially important here because the contest is a magical duel that's over when one of the 2 contestants grabs the Staff of Olans that rests in the center of the hall. It isn't strictly speaking to the death, and in fact that's generally frowned upon, but one of the lores of magic in this setting is the lore of death magic. It happens sometimes. The incumbent then faces the challengers one at a time until there's either a new Supreme Patriarch or the current one gets to keep their job for another 8 years. Gelt won this contest, becoming the new Supreme Patriarch after beating Thyre.
So, is his beard growing so fast that it never burns away, or... We should probably just put out his face, right?
Gorman, a lore of fire wizard who, on an unrelated note, is built like a goddamn freight train. Ever since, he's largely continued on as he has, only with more power at his commands, both politically and literally. In fact, just to show you how serious I am, I'm going to compare him favorably to the elves. Balthasar Gelt, being human, might not be the most powerful wizard in the setting. Teclis, Mazdamundi, Marathi, and a few others are undoubtedly able to overpower him. But in mastery of the winds of metal particularly, he is unrivaled. Not a single being alive knows the winds of metal as well as he does. In fact, assuming we take his potential backstory as true, that would explain why he was so talented with minerals and herbs. One of the spells of the lore of metal is Breach the Unknown, and it tells you everything about an object from its chemical composition to any magical properties it might have. He could have been unconsciously using that spell as a kid. There was one battle known as the Slaughter at the 6 Spikes, where he more or less single-handedly turned the tide of battle. Truth be told, most of it isn't terribly important. It was the Beastmen using the aforementioned 6 Spikes, which as it turns out were magical rocks to bring ruin to the realms of man and all that jazz. The very shaman in charge of the Beastmen horde was casting fell magics and making a terrible storm. There were great and terrible beasts such as gorgons and minotaurs, and all kinds of stuff I'm sure is terribly frightening in universe. Out of universe, we know the Beastmen never amount to anything.
I want you all to understand that Age of Mythology music is being played in the background. It's making me want to play it very badly.
So it's kind of hard to care.
I haven't gotten to play my
The Empire
game
apparently
yet.
sent warnings regarding this threat in part with mechanical pigeons, though, so that's neat. I'm sorry, being dismissive of the Beastmen is so ingrained in Warhammer, I can't help myself. Even in Total War, facing them is more inconvenient than threatening half the time, with the singular exception of Franz's early campaign where they glass Middenheim as often as not. To be fair to them, the Empire force was led by Kurt Helborg, head of the Reichsguard and all-around cool dude. If he's being brought to the fight, it can't be a small incursion. And even with both constant casualties inflicted on the Beastman and his magnificent mustache, the Empire was being pushed back. No cannon shots could harm any of the...
That guy looks like God from One Piece.
Spikes, and it looked like without something decisive happening, man would lose to beast.
Which either begs the question, was God inspired by Warhammer? Does Oda watch Warhammer? Or does Warhammer like Oda?
And Balthasar Gelt came riding in on his Pegasus Quicksilver with reinforcements. Reinforcements, I should add, that consisted of the entirety of the Imperial Zoo in Altdorf. He just bound them to his will and threw them into battle. I haven't the slightest idea how he did this, because
Oh no, Lavinia!
unless I'm missing something, the lore of metal doesn't have any spells that let him do that. This included the dragon that the Empire keeps, by the way. Gelt is just built different to your average person.
Dragon!
Since Gelt is a smart lad, he knew that even with his literal menagerie of reinforcements, he couldn't quite turn the tide if he just landed in the middle of the battlefield. So he took his beasts, jumped the Bray Shaman and his assistants atop the 6 Spikes, and either had them turned to gold or ripped apart. Wizards gotten rid of, he then turned most of the rest of the Beastman army into gold. It's said that not a single one managed to escape, which is in all honesty an incredibly impressive feat. They're
Dragon
damn
are
fast,
pets
but Gelt
in
and
Warhammer.
Quicksilver were apparently faster. Worth mentioning is that while Gelt isn't
I'm gonna pet you in the face.
directly involved in every single instance of a wizard
If I was in Warhammer, dragons would no longer be pets. Dragons would be the top species.
doing something in the Empire, he is the Supreme Patriarch. Nothing important is going to go on amongst the mages of man without his knowledge of it in some way. Given that, you can safely assume some level of involvement on Balthasar Gelt's part in anything sufficiently magical that occurs in most books that happen in what was Warhammer Fantasy's modern setting. Oh, there's also another time Gelt pulled the old gold as actually lead.
Even the
Although
Sunny
this time
Jelly
he
King,
actually
I will
turned real
roll for
gold
you in
into
a
lead, so
second.
it was sort of
Emergency
reversed.
food, yeah.
The Elector Count of
Baka.
Nordland was being aggressive towards the province of Hawkland.
So it seems that there's one mustache that's very popular. Do they know that that's technically the wizard, the villain mustache?
Carl told Gelt to fix it, so Gelt went to Nordland, turned the Count's treasury into lead, and then left. Please be aware, viewer, that this is not the last time he does this. Running through to the end times, and Gelt has some
He just turns the council treasury into lead? Damn, dude.
moments, to be sure. In as much fairness as one can possibly give the end times, which is not much in brutal
Don't insult him.
honesty,
There
the
is
big
no
moment Gelt
heroes
is
in
known for
Warhammer.
only comes at the
Fantasy
end. Prior
or
to that, he puts in a
40K.
pretty good showing of things.
I'm starting
A
to
lot of what
understand
he does
that.
is at least understandable. Reading
That
what
would be the
happens to
first
him,
hero.
I don't get the feeling I do for a lot of
And by hero, I mean the villain that no one could say is a villain because I'd kill them.
other instances in the end times. That feeling naturally being, what the hell are the authors smoking? See, after Volkmar vanished into Sylvania, which would lead him to possibly the worst fate imaginable, Gelt constructed what was known as the Wall of Faith around the entire province. He got the idea from one of his apprentices, which was assisted even further by the delivery of a scroll from a rather odd but ultimately helpful woman. It allowed for faith and magic to be blended almost perfectly, and as long as it was maintained by both mages and priests, the wall would be held
I
strong.
cast economic
Unfortunately
recession.
for our man, this was immediately the start of his downfall. Because the woman was a vampire working for Neferata, and was probably that one vampire named Genevieve who has the single longest full name in any Warhammer setting short of Cetra and the knight from Shoota's Blood and Teeth. And his apprentice earlier was actually the Changeling. I believe it was unsaid why the Changeling was giving Gelt away to keep the vampires contained, but there's three likely options. A, this was done to stall Nagash's return as long as possible. B, this was just step one of the naturally convoluted plan to get the Changeling integrated in the Empire to wreak the most amount of havoc possible. Or C, Tzeentch and the Changeling were bored and thought it'd be funny. Tzeentch doesn't really need a reason to scheme over complicated BS like this, it's his whole thing. Gelt for his part gained quite a bit of popularity for cordoning off all of Sylvania. Both wanted to keep the Empire safe and being the kind of person who shouts out "I am supreme" during a
I am supreme!
battle, he decided he'd go for gold and make an even bigger wall. This time it was across the entire Empire of
I cast Mend Butt Crack!
Man's northern border, with a little bit of it protecting part of Kislev. Gotta say, it wasn't subtle, but it was sure as hell effective. Just plonking an entire massive wall across your country's borders in the blink of an eye is certainly a good way to keep demons out, and sure enough, Archaon and his horde couldn't immediately breach their way in. Unfortunately for Gelt, this is the part where he starts realizing he has a lot of issues to deal with. First off, Chaos being the bigger threat meant that the wall around Sylvania had fallen somewhat by the wayside. It was still there, but it wasn't being nearly as maintained as it needed to be given the Auric Bastion coming to existence. Compounding on this is that the Auric Bastion's far larger scale meant little cracks tended to appear here and there, weaknesses that could be taken advantage of. Not yet catastrophic ones, or at least not ones that an entire horde could swarm through, but cracks were appearing in the wall, segments were weakening. And to top it off, Gelt finally wisened up to the fact that the Changeling was running amok, and he allied with the R. Ulrich Emil Valgir to sniff him out. Because the only thing Gelt loves more than money and power is apparently digging himself deeper into a hole, he
A face only a mother could love.
also came across Vlad von Karstein. Now look, I understand everyone loves Vlad. I also love Vlad. But in universe, not many people like Vlad. He's a bit of an untrusted figure on
missed the
account of
face
being
that
a
only a mother
vampire
could love.
and nearly toppling the Empire. So when him and Vlad have a chat
Oh, no,
about the
it's still
wall
here.
and
Never
Vlad
mind.
gives him a tome that teaches him how to
Look
do
at the face.
necromancy, what Gelt should have done was burn it. What he did instead was very briefly debate using it, decide it was a necessary evil, and then immediately start raising zombies to defend the Auric Bastion. This led up to a confrontation against the Elector Count of Hawkland, who was a little
Let's all understand that Boka is pro-necromancer.
A little bit pissed about him being a necromancer, which ended in the Elector Count's death, which is just a slight smidgen of treason. Even worse for Gelt was that he discovered that Valten was to be gifted Galmaraz itself, being the pseudo-incarnation of Sigmar and all that. The problem here is that he had learned that Valten was almost certainly the Changeling, and handing over the symbol of the Empire and Warhammer itself to a Tzeentch demon was not a good outcome. So naturally, he went to go rescue Galmaraz and Karl from the Changeling's evil clutches. And then when his desperate argument that more or less amounted to "please trust me, Mr. Emperor, he's for real a bad guy" didn't work, he just gave up and started summoning zombies to try and kill Valten with. Shocker, not only does this not work because Kurt Helborg held him off, but Valten wasn't even the Changeling. It was the Ulrich. This was promptly dealt with, but by this point Gelt had lost any semblance of faith in himself and wandered off to be one of Vlad's...
Oh, he's one of those, like... He was wrong too many times in a row. Being as smart as he is, that actually damaged his, like, faith in himself.
Many hanger-ons, since he clearly couldn't handle independence. Worse off for the Empire than just losing...
What kind of joke is that? You can't start a conversation like that. What do you mean your dog's purebred? Is he actually bred? Or is this a joke? And then, like... Rude.
Its Supreme Patriarch was losing the Ulrich Bastion. Because it was supported by wizards and priests, it needed a constant stream of both faith and magic to keep it going. And when it turns out the guy who created it was a necromancer that tried to kill the dude who was probably your main god reborn, no one was exactly feeling the Ulrich Bastion anymore. Whether or not this was Tzeentch's ultimate plan, or if it was just a happy consolation prize instead of Galmaraz, I'll leave for you to decide, but at the end of the day, the wall came down, and Chaos can now invade the Empire properly. He and Vlad, for their part, create one hell of an undead army to fight Chaos with, and at Everheim, he eventually manages to have another moral compass turnaround and binds himself to the winds of Shamon, purging the dark arts of necromancy from his mind. Funnily enough, though, he isn't done agreeing with evil bastards, because he and Malekith are the only ones who say that Nagash isn't someone the incarnates of the winds of magic should ally with. On the one hand, Balthasar Gelt probably doesn't have any room to be arguing against necromancy after the shit he pulled, but on the other hand, he does have experience on why it's a bad idea.
Why is his hat so big? Does he have a big head, or is he compensating?
Also, Nagash. I get it, come Age of Sigmar, I'm Nagash's #1 fan, but we're still in fantasy here. Do not trust this man. You can't even say that with a straight face. This isn't a man. This is a god. This is Nagash. Trusting him is worse than trusting Tzeentch, because you can probably see Tzeentch's betrayal coming a mile away.
Wow.
But they do, and then it's off to try and pull one final ritual to save the world. And man, you know how it goes. It's never fun talking about the end of the end times, but because Gelt is very involved in the big event, I kinda feel obligated. You know what makes everything even worse, though? In the ritual the Incarnates were gonna cast to stave off the end of the world, they had more or less retaken Middenheim. I mean, sure, not completely. For example, Sigmar and Archaon were still wrestling over the big hammer somewhere, but they were able to start casting an incredibly magic and focus-intense ritual to save the world. You can't do that in the middle of a battlefield, because otherwise you'd be getting stabbed. And sure enough, the Incarnates weren't doing it in the middle of the battlefield, at least enough of it was moved away so all their respective armies could hold off chaos while the big names did the ritual. And then Balthasar Gelt made the assumption that he wasn't going to be stabbed in the back while he was saving the world by a vampire who was only doing it to spite his father one last time. Thank you, Manfred. Whenever someone brings up who's worse,
That's so, like, anticlimactic and dumb.
For Erebus, it's an easy answer. Erebus gave us 40k. Manfred removed the amount of Warhammer that exists in the universe, because he wasn't involved in any way in Age of Sigmar's birth when it comes to in-universe actions taken. Not intentionally, at least. He had no idea the Mortal Realms would come about. He just wanted to spite Vlad, so he stabbed Gelt in the back. With that, unfortunately, the tale of Balthasar Gelt ends here. A great, if by no means unselfish hero who died trying his best to save the world. Even if he only did it so he could continue to accrue money and power, hard to argue with someone trying to save the world no matter their motives. So on a completely unrelated note, let's talk about this Balthasar fellow. He's a Stormcast Eternal who has a strange idea that the world that was is where he's originally from in some regard. He's so talented in the lore of metal that it's as if Shamon recognized him somehow. He's met Nagash, who outright said he was looking forward to having him under his thumb again, and he has a mount named Quicksilver. He also rarely, if ever,
Badass name.
Takes off his golden face mask. Golly gee willikers, guys, who could this fella be? Did you know Arum is the Latin word for gold? Could be anyone, this guy.
So it's just Gelt. It's just Gelt, but they wanted to kill the hero version of Gelt.
Truly. Our reborn as a superhero friend may not know who he truly is, but we do, and enough important people do as well that I wouldn't be surprised if Sigmar specifically sought his soul out. Temporary traitor or not, he nearly saved the world when push came to shove. And he continued being the little scammer we know and love, only now at the level of a demigod of war.
Oh, so basically he got reborn as a demigod.
That business with the Elector Count of Nordland, well, this time, there was once a city that was rebelling against Sigmar. It was phenomenally wealthy, and as a result had gathered quite the mercenary army to keep itself safe. This would have been a war that, while Sigmar's forces would surely win, would cause no small amount of casualties for even the Stormcast Eternals. So Balthasar Gelt, who had no idea this is the second time he pulled this stunt, flew into the city, turned their massive stored amounts of gold into granite, and because no one was paying them anymore, the mercenaries just left. Naturally, the city also surrendered, and likely had to face the mother of all economic crises in the aftermath. Also, please be aware.
So that's what y'all mean by I cast economic recession. Okay. He's known as the guy that just, oh, the reason you're winning is because you're rich? Well, bam. All you have is rocks now.
That a good portion of his motivation for this was that the city had some stuff in it he wanted for his research. So he threw the entire thing into an economic recession. He features in the book Soul Wars, which I won't really go through, but it's a good read.
I love it.
I will go through the short story The Library
Very,
of Forgotten Moments,
spiteful.
though, because aside from being about his quest to discover who he was, it also has some glorious payback. The story, sure enough, begins with Gelt seeking the Library of Forgotten Moments. He's a Lord Arcanum now, and by his own words, their chief goal above all others is to fix the reforging process of the Stormcast Eternals. But also by his own admission, he's got some more selfish motives. He needs to learn who he was. He has to. He more or less outright says that even if what he learns brings him to madness, it'll at least put him further on some sort of path. There's also a pretty interesting moment where his mount, Quicksilver 2.0, goes at what appears to be light speed. Not important, but damn cool. He reaches...
Yeah, pretty cool. At least it like, does its namesake.
the library with what seems to be a
becomes
little
Quicksilver.
fanfare, all things considered, and is granted access by its undead caretakers. This is all in Shyish, by the by, since where else would a library about a dead world be but the land of the dead? And as he goes deep into the library, he finds a book in a language not from the mortal realms, but one he for some reason knows is familiar to him. He reads a single word, Alcahest, and gets a flashback to the old fantasy world. And do you want to guess what his first vision of his past life was? What great and overwhelming mystery he saw unraveled? The motherfucker's first vision of his past life from a period of time so long ago age no longer has meaning was him scamming the poor ship captain with fake gold. He's so committed to the bit that scamming people is embedded in his soul. Shortly after, he comes into contact with a vampire, or rather, the vampire in Age of Sigmar, Manny von Kari himself. They get into a bit of a duel, are interrupted by the undead keepers of the library, and are both escorted to the prized possession of the library. Without spoiling what it is, both because it's a good story you should read for yourself, and because it's a short one, so I'd just be spoiling the whole damn thing, what they find is quite related to the old world. They also both recognize each other, although neither of them can really place what the relationship used to be. Manfred is Manfred, so they start fighting again, and Gelt shows that while he may not be the strongest wizard around, he's damn smart. And also a Stormcast now, so he can throw hands physically when need be too. The story ends with Gelt on the cusp of potentially learning who he once was, and only time and future book releases will tell if he truly finds out here. Now with all that said and done, Gelt to my knowledge has no special rules on the tabletop. He's had quite...
He really likes having a gold mask, though. Even when he doesn't know who he is, apparently he likes gold masks.
the honors in his stories, having spoken with Sigmar himself and surviving an encounter with Nagash, but no rules, which is a shame. I can honestly understand him not getting a model because he always wears the mask, so you can just call a Lord Arcanum Gelt and be happy with it, but some rules would be appreciated. He's also not in the old world either, slightly more understandably though, because this is a good few hundred years before his birth. And just to further rub salt in my wounds, Total Warhammer keeps crashing on me. I changed the mod list, updated and reinstalled some mods, and then just turned them all off. Still randomly crashes when I attack a settlement. Although random might not quite be the word, because it'll repeatedly crash on the same settlement when I reload. So unfortunately, properly getting footage or even just the damn screenshots like I somehow managed to squeeze into a video about gameplay without feeling any amount of shame isn't gonna happen. TLDR though, with him moving to Cathay, you can now truly blast Fortunate Son. Thank you for watching, and take care out there.
Truly blast Fortunate Son. I think I accidentally clicked forward.
Oh, by the way, that alkahest thing? It's actually a real thing in both Warhammer and at one point theorized to be in real life. It's the universal solvent that can dissolve anything without destroying or altering its fundamental components. Most importantly, gold. In Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop, Gelt carries a vial of it around that he throws at people. This man carries a vial of acid around and breaks it off on people who bother him. I love him.
He takes the statement of... Yeah, he
Warhammer
wants to
has no
turn everyone
shortage
into, to puddles. Got it. Understandable. Alright. Understandable. Have a nice day. There's peak. So much peak. Alright, let's think about this. What do we want to do? Oh, and don't forget to like and give the video a like. And subscribe if you enjoyed them.